Fireflood and Other Stories by Vonda and McIntyre. So this is a collection of short stories that was copyright 1981. I have this Pocket Books Timescape edition here. And there's 11 short stories in here that were all written in the 70s. And I have read a few I've read a few novels from Vonda and McIntyre so far. I read The Moon and the Sun, which was different. This was more of a historical fiction that had to do with mermen. And I did enjoy it. The writing was really good, but maybe the subject matter just didn't quite do it for me. And it was a bit long. And then I've also read Dream Snake, which I enjoyed quite a bit more. And we'll get back to this one because there is a short story in this collection that's kind of linked to that one. So first off, I'll say that this was quite a different collection of short stories that I've read lately. The writing is definitely kind of in what you would consider the new wave. You have a lot of main characters or protagonists that have had some horrible things done to them. A lot of times just without their input or anything, and they're just kind of left dealing with this new reality that they have. And she does a lot of like inner work in these characters, seeing how they feel, how they're trying to adapt to these strange circumstances they see them in. And some of them are even born into these situations. A lot of these stories are very dark, they're disturbing. I space these stories out because I don't think you would really want to binge this collection. But they were really well written. They did make you think, and I overall enjoyed this one. I would say there was some that really stood out. Overall, it was probably slightly above average for me. But like I said, there was 11 stories in here, so I'm going to try to go over all 11 pretty quickly. There was one story called The End's Beginning, and this had to do with a dolphin that was kind of given human level intelligence and sent out to carry on a mission. And as he's swimming through the ocean, you get all kinds of insight in this dolphin's brain, and it kind of had ecological and war tone to that one. Another one was called Only at Night, and this was a very deeply disturbing story. This was about a nurse who was working in a kind of children's hospital, and these children seem to have been mutated, probably by radiation or something like that. It's not all described, but she's a night nurse and she takes care of these children at night. And she's there alone, and some things start happening, and you really start questioning a lot of things, whether this is really happening or if it's all in her head. It was one of the shorter ones in the collection, but probably one of the most disturbing as well. Then there was one called The Genius Freaks, and this was a story about how humans had started creating these artificial humans, raising them in these artificial wombs to be like super geniuses. And the story revolves around this girl who was born out of this artificial womb, and she remembers being in the womb and looking out through the glass at the world, and it's very interesting. But she's born eventually. She decides to escape and try to outwit these people that are chasing her. It was another one that was a bit disturbing, probably not my favorite, but that one has stuck with me for a while. Now there was one called Aztecs, and I didn't really like this one that much. It was one of the longer ones, and it was the last story in the collection, so I don't know if I was a little fatigued from reading the other stories, but it did seem a little bit slow. But I know a lot of people claim this is like one of their favorite short stories in this collection. It was later turned into a full novel called Superliminal, and it had to do with this kind of academy to get humans ready for this faster than light travel. And there was all different positions people could take in this academy. But the main character, she's going to become a pilot, and they have to go through some special things to be able to live through this faster than light travel. It was an interesting concept. It did seem like a little bit slow and drug out to me, but I would either like to reread that or read the novel Superliminal at some point, because like I said, I know a lot of people really enjoy that one. Then there was one called The Mountains of Sunset, The Mountains of Dawn. And this is about these aliens who are leaving their planet, and they're getting ready to, or they're on a generational ship, and there's some characters who are musing about this whole situation they're in, an older character and a younger one. It was pretty interesting, but probably not my favorite by any means in this collection. Now, there was also one in particular in this collection that stood out as quite a bit different, and it was called Recourse Inc. And it was fairly lighthearted. There was a little twist or a punchline at the end. It was satirical, and what it was a short story that was written all by correspondence letters going back and forth between some people. And what Recourse Inc. is, they're a company who, if you were wronged by some corporation, you could reach out to them and they would try to help rectify the situation. And we have a person who tried to buy something and they got double charged basically, and they get Recourse Inc. to kind of help arbitrate this situation for them. It's pretty comical. There's a lot of satire about capitalism and corporations, and there is a pretty funny twist at the end. It was kind of nice to get to that one because it just felt so different than all the other kind of deep, heady stories that were in this collection. Then there was a story called Wings. There's a few stories that have to do with these either winged humans or winged aliens. I feel like the cover art could almost work for about 3 of these stories that were in here. This was another one. It was linked to that other one about the aliens leaving their planet on that generational ship. I liked this one called Wings quite a bit better. It was dealing with some of the aliens that had stayed on their planet. And the one alien was kind of a solitary guardian to this temple and had been basically living his life in solitude. And another alien crash lands, because they're winged, near his temple, and he kind of helps get him back up to health. And you start to find out that this other alien that crash landed was kind of on this suicidal mission, and they kind of go through why that would be. It was pretty interesting. It was a little dark, but it was one that's really stuck with me out of this collection. Then there was one called Spectra. Now this one was really disturbing. There was this girl who had her eyes removed, and she is kind of enslaved by you. It's hard to even tell what's going on because it's all through her point of view, and how she's kind of trying to adapt to what the situation that she's been put in. She doesn't have quite the vision, she does have some sensory input, but she doesn't have the vision that we are all used to. And she's reflecting back into her life when she did have this vision, and it's very heart-wrenching. It's very sad, and she's stuck performing these just kind of menial tasks and trying to figure out what's going on in this world. Like I said, very dark. Then there was another one that had to do with some winged people. This one, it was called Fireflood, which is the kind of main story, the title of this collection, Fireflood and Other Stories. It was probably my 3rd favorite in here. And this, you kind of don't know what's going on at first. If you don't want any spoilers, I'll go ahead and hold this book up. And once this book is down, you can continue the video. But I won't spoil too much, but at first you're not sure what's going on. and you realize that humans have kind of genetically altered a couple versions of humans. One are these kind of armadillo type digger humans that almost completely live underground, and another type of winged humans. And the kind of setup is that these humans were breeding these other types of genetically modified humans to go live on some potential planets that a normal human couldn't live on. Well, when that didn't happen, they're kind of left with these genetically modified versions of humans, and they've kind of camped them up into internment camps in a way. And the story follows this girl who was one of these armadillo like digger type humans as she's trying to escape her camp and go meet up with some of these winged humans. It was very interesting. It takes a while to figure out what's going on in this one, but stick with it, and it was fascinating in my opinion. Okay, my second favorite one was a story called Screwtop, and I actually have this Tor double that has Screwtop on one side and the girl who was plugged in by James Tiptree Jr. This is an amazing novella, and this one too I really enjoyed. So this one is mostly about a main character who has kind of been traveling around the galaxy, and she ends up getting caught and put on this planet called Red Sun. And this is not a very nice place. The occupants of this planet, and you don't really get a ton of background, but the occupants of this planet are almost using this as like a slave colony to get a bunch of work done. And the way she describes the planet is really good. They don't even need cages or fencing or anything because the planet is so inhospitable that they almost dare the captives to leave. There's a group of about 4 characters that the whole story revolves around, and you slowly get fed their backstory, and it was just a really well-written story, and it is very gut-wrenching, but probably my second favorite one in the whole collection. And so my favorite short story in this collection was called Of Mist and Grass and Sand. And what it is it's actually the first chapter in the novel Dream Snake. And I kind of compared the two of them. It seems to be word for word just the first chapter of this novel. And I really enjoyed this novel. I loved the beginning, the intro, the setup, the ideas were so unique. And as I read further into this novel, I kind of, it didn't really live up to the introduction. And so I can see why the short story of Mist and Grass and Sand is so popular. It won a Nebula Award, and it's basically just an introduction to this world. And what it is, in case you're unaware, Snake is a woman who lives in this post-apocalyptic future Earth, and she uses these 3 snakes as a healing mechanism, and she goes around and finds people who need some help and goes to heal them. So this short story is basically an introduction to her and how this works, and her first encounter when she goes to a camp and heals a small child. It's amazing short story, and it's an amazing beginning to the novel too. I would be curious if anyone has only read the short story. I think it's one that hooks you in so much you would kind of feel like you have to read the novel, but I think they're both good in their own rights, but it works so well as a short story, and I never would have thought that when I was reading the novel. So that's going to do it. Like I said, this was quite a bit different for some of the short stories I've been reading lately. Some were definitely better than others. All of them had kind of a different flair. And so if you're into, mixing it up and looking into something a little different, a little darker, this might be a collection for you. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.